wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we are celebrating the new year of 2018, so welcome. And so in keeping with this, our podcast this week is New Year, New Transitions and New Ways of Being. So we want to talk about transitions and how we actually face the becoming of our new year. So before we do that, I want to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe, where once a week we send you a wrap-up of everything we've put out in the world, so you can pick and choose what you'd love to dive deeper into. And then once a week we might also send you a love letter, which is just like an awakening, a story, a conversation Bridget and I would have between ourselves that we think a conscious mama like you would be really interested in. So please jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe and keep engaged and linked up.
And I also want to, before we dive deeply into this topic, which is so big and juicy, I do want to put a pin in the idea that a new year can bring up a lot of perhaps difficult feelings around or you know, big feelings of promise about what's ahead. And this is a theme that we really tackled this time last year in our podcast, which was titled New Year, New You. And it really looked at this idea of, you know, if you're hating on the year that was, well, why is that, and what can you learn from it, and how can you find gratitude from that to propel you into a new year with a lot more consciousness. So that's episode 79 if you want to go back and listen to that.
Which is funny because I would never have gone back to it, but in our group you were saying someone had said it's actually really great. Yeah. And then you went back and listened and texted me going, it's actually really good.
Yes, it's funny because Megan in our group, she wrote a most beautiful message and said, you know, go back and listen to that episode if you haven't, to everybody else in the group. And I'm like, oh, I'll go listen to it, thanks. So yeah, do that.
And always speaking to ourselves.
Yes, of course. So new year, new transitions. Transitions is, I guess, perhaps with personal story, first of all, it's somewhere that I've found myself very quickly preparing to be a school mum. And in a very short space of time thinking about what do I need to do to help my son prepare for that real shift in his world. And also what do I need to bring in myself so I can really step into that role and be who he needs to be for, you know, prep, and also who I really want to show up as for myself and for him. And there are so many different kinds of transitions, both letting go of things and also preparing for new things that we can find ourselves in a new year, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, the new year, I need to really re-immerse myself in it because it is a bit bittersweet sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes I think like this morning, actually, I was doing it with my husband because I was looking on Instagram, because it all starts with social media.
Oh, yeah, doesn't it?
So I was trawling through Instagram, and which I actually love as a social media platform, but it is probably the biggest platform of comparison, I think, generally. And also that's where I find myself sitting in it, and I have to be really careful. I have to be really conscious of my time I spend on there, because I can downward spiral very quickly.
Yes, you really have to self-check on that.
I really do, yeah. I always, whenever I'm on Instagram, I have this little voice in my head, this almost self-awareness camera going, if you're enjoying it, you stay, and if you're not, switch it off.
Yeah.
And I really am constantly kind of self-checking that because I'm completely aware. Anyway, so it started with Instagram, and there's all these gorgeous biz mums around me who are, you know, posting, you know, huge shout outs and thanks to all the people that had made 2017 amazing and what their big goals were for 2018. I was like, well, fuck, I haven't got any big goals. I better get that shit sorted. So I sat there while I was breastfeeding, smacking out the goals that I wanted for 2018. And then I was like, right, well, what I didn't do for 2017 was I didn't get really strategic. So I had the big goals, like the big vision board, but then I didn't block it down into what that meant.
Into manageable chunks.
Yeah, well, yeah, but just into even tangible chunks. So it's one thing to go, I want to make $1 million next year, and be like, affirmation. But if you haven't actually stepped it down into, okay, well, that means this much per month, and I'm making that by doing this per month, per week, per day, then that $1 million is never coming, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
And I kept thinking, I listened to this podcast during the holidays, actually, and for life of me, cannot remember which one it was. And they were talking about, someone had read this self-help book that was talking about, you've got to be, man, you've got to be, you know. And all of a sudden it clicked for me, and I felt like all those files of self-help books I've read for decades, all of a sudden it clicked, and I went, Oh, it's no good just being like affirming and, you know, trying to sit in the vibration of that thing that you want so that you attract it. You've actually got to do, if you want to be a millionaire, you've got to do what a millionaire does. Can't just be.
Yeah.
And if you want to have amazing, healthy food in your house, you've got to do amazing, healthy food in your house in order to be amazingly healthy.
Yeah.
And if you want to be super fit, then you've got to do what a super fit person would do right now in order to maintain it.
It's funny, isn't it? Because
And I just kept going.
Yeah.
I kept going. And if you want to have an amazing sex life, then you've got to do the amazing sex life. What would a person with an amazing sex life be doing right now? Well, why aren't I doing that?
they probably would be having sex.
I was just like going, and I just started extrapolating out.
Yeah.
And also because this year I really worked really hard and consciously, which if you follow this podcast, you know for a really long time I've had huge money blocks.
Yeah.
And actually started this time last year when you and I did the Flip Your Finances course, which is now an audio download if you want to download it on Nourishing the Mother. And it got me thinking and changing the way that I was considering sitting with, being with money and finances. And whilst it's been incremental changes over the course of the year, I'm in a completely different place to what I was at the start of the year. And that's huge. So this is all like reflections on 2017, right?
Yeah.
And then I went, okay, but now I get it. So I've kind of chunked everything and stacked it and auto everything, and I'm really happy with how it is. But if I want more, then I have to do what a person who has more would do. And so then I'm like, well, then I have to step it up, because a person who is like a millionaire wouldn't be sitting there going, oh, it's good, all good, take care of itself now. They'd be going, I'm checking the accounts, I'm watching what I'm doing, and how am I funneling? And I'm like, so now I have to do that, because if I want that, I have to do that, or I'm going to stay here.
It's the same thing. I mean, a really good analogy for that kind of thing is training, right? So you're training for fitness, or you're kind of wanting to get to the next level of you know, your exercise challenges. You know that you have to work incrementally, and that it doesn't happen like that. There's work in that. There's action that's required.
Yes.
But it's so funny, I think, that we can get caught up in, particularly if you do have values around like spirituality, that there can be some kind of manifestation without conscious effort.
Yes.
You know, like, because that's required alongside the strong intention or the thought or the doing.
Yeah, and I kept thinking that even if it's only 5 minutes a day, by the time you get to the end of that year, that's a lot of time that if you had not consistently shown up for 5 minutes a day would not have happened.
Yeah.
And over the course of a year, that makes a big difference. No difference to, you know, you could look at $5 a day if you're committed to that instead of a coffee in your bank account, or 5 minutes a day on a big dream. By the end of 2018, you'll be in a completely different place to what you were at the beginning of 2018. But without the thought and the inspired action, it doesn't happen. It's like the creation of time, right? We wait for the perfect time or the perfect moment, or we think that seduction will happen upon us, or the perfect parenting moment,
or the
of
breakthrough
presence,
will just come without us.
Or we don't have to consciously be the ones that make ourselves carve out the time for self, because it will just happen, or someone will see it and give it to us. No, it's the doing. You can have the big dream, but it doesn't matter what it is. You've got to do the thing that the person with that would already be doing. Because you have to be like the law, whatever there is, the universal laws, you know, you have to become the person for whom that is a reality. Yeah. And the person for whom that is a reality is doing something completely different to what you are currently doing. So if you want that thing, you've got to be that person. Do you know what
I love it.
I'm ranting because I'm like, oh my God, it's finally clicked.
But you knew this intuitively.
Well, I mean, I knew it, but
you could, because if you think about this applied in your highest values around family.
Well, that's true. In highest values, it's effortless. Yes.
You know this. Because think about all the preparation that you do for your children to help them socialise and relate to other people in the world and all of that kind of stuff. You know that just doesn't happen. You have to constantly prepare, refine, reflect, all of that.
It's true.
It's simply just you're now asking yourself to apply it in a totally different area that wasn't previously on your values and now is.
Yes. So I'm looking at applying it to areas that are not unconsciously my top values, and I'm wanting to empower those areas of life because they're currently disempowered. And so I'm looking at what is a person who is empowered in that area, would they be doing? And then I'm making myself do it.
It's really great reflection to do, and it's a fantastic thing to do at the end of a year or at the beginning of a new year, to start to look at, okay, what area of my life am I not feeling empowered in right now? And what could I do to feel more empowered in that still allows me to stay in my other top values? Because it can be really a classic case, or a classic example of people going hard slogging in business or hard slogging in family or whatever it is, and forget and let everything else drop by the wayside, which you then see manifest as broken friendships, relationship issues if everything goes into business, poor health or fitness. It is possible to empower every area, but it's about looking at it in a strategic kind of way, like you're doing, and asking yourself, what do I need to bring to this to feel more connected, inspired, empowered in this area of life? Because it's possible to and you and I have talked about this a lot, we have to battle our own subconscious and conscious mindsets around the perception that if we show up heaps in business, that it would take away from our family because we have family as such a high value. But that's because we're battling with this subconscious belief that we couldn't do both, which is not true. And it's constantly having that dialogue with ourselves and that reframing, which is so much of what we work through in our Living to Loving program, is that where are these thoughts coming from? Are they our beliefs? Why do we have them? And I've just finished reading The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, and it's just so fantastic because it reiterates all of this stuff that we know, but it puts the science underneath it, like a really scientific look at the cell and the look at the way in our culture we don't recognise the power of thought and the power of the mind to manifest the reality that we have. And this is all that stuff. So new ways of being, which is part of the topic of this podcast, is really about looking at what we're perceiving is missing or we want to empower, and how we can do that in a conscious way that still allows us to be empowered and also what we truly value, and them not have to be mutually exclusive.
Okay, so we're just going to interrupt this recording just for a minute because we do have L2L starting in February, which, if you're not familiar with the language, is Loathing to Loving program, which is our signature 5-week program where you spend 5 weeks online with us, with 4 modules that we workshop you through, which you have lifetime access to, so you can dive back in as many times as you like. And we run 3 live rounds a year, which you can join in as many as you like as well. And we find often that 3 times a year is almost just like that check-in, that you kind of hit the new thing and you go, yes, I've nailed it. And then it slides off again. Then you come back again and then you do the next layer, and it often works incredibly well. So we do really invite you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs and have a look at Loathing to Loving. Do you want to add anything, Bridget?
I just think that it's a great reminder for everybody to, if the concepts of the podcast are resonating with you, but you want a deeper immersion and make them part of your life, then this is the program to do, because not only do you have the 5 weeks with us, but you also go into our Connect, Inspire, Thrive tribe, which is, there's often posts in there daily or, every few times a week from people wanting to know how to implement or, kind of get some insight from the group. And when we're all thinking this way, it's amazing how much that comes on board for you naturally as a way of being.
Definitely the daily check-in. So please jump on nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs and have a look at Loathing to Loving.
I think it's a great time now to talk a little bit more about transitions, and a key one, I suppose, that brings us all here is the transition to motherhood and transition to looking after a baby, or perhaps preparing for expanding your family, which we can see manifest as difficulty in some people with fertility, because even our beliefs get in the way of our belief in ourselves and our capacity to do more and to expand ourselves enough to hold family. And one of the transitions that I think Jules has found herself in so much this year has been growing as into a mother of 4, and how you could, if you chose to, and all of us probably did with our first child, lose yourself in that mothering. But you've obviously had to make a conscious effort and intention around how you can be here for this baby, but also really hold the space for both yourself and your whole family in that transition. What does that look like for you?
Yes. It's up and down, actually. I think I'm not going to lie, because family is my top value, there's part of me that I always feel like I'm kind of fighting, that just wants to lose myself in motherhood. There's part of me that just wants to be engulfed by it and just be here and not be anywhere else. Maybe not even leave my 4 walls. There's part of me that, there's part of me that fucking hates that shit. Yeah. But there's part of me that's like, I could just surrender. I could just drink this. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so to some extent, I think that's being a top value.
Yeah.
And if I'm not conscious. So if I don't have, we talk about organisation, right? Because if I don't have to-do lists in my week, it wouldn't get done because I would saturate myself in my kids and nothing else would get done. Because let's face it, they can take up as much time as you want them to take up, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but I can be really clear on, no, I need you to go and play by yourself now. Or I could get plugged into, oh, well, I should.
Yeah, it's so true.
And in which case I'd spend the whole day playing, which is lovely. But if I have other intentions for my life, then I look at that. And also because I have kids that are on the pinnacle of becoming teenagers, honestly, in this, like, talk about this transitions, right? The ending of a year. Like, I just go, holy fuck. You know, like this year I've got nearly 2 teenagers. I've had a baby. I have a child who's nearly finished kinder. And it just all feels fast. It all feels like the end almost. And I have all these friends who have kids just slightly older than mine who are, you know, finishing high school, finishing uni. They're starting to drive. They're, you know, like, because it's Christmas time and everybody's together, you're probably more saturated in it. And I've heard so many people this week go, oh, look, it just has disappeared. I walked past my neighbour yesterday who went, oh, Christmas is not the same without little people. It's lost its magic. And I went, oh, because I can get so lost in, oh, God, we're here. And she's like, no, I know. I remember that. But then it's gone, and it's gone forever.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think about my son and leaving to go and play college or something, and I'm like, fuck, I've got this tiny amount of time. And so there's part of me that goes, just saturate, just stay here forever and ever, because it's so quick.
Yeah.
And, you know, then I have so many friends who have lost babies and children, who have passed away, who have died. I fucking watched a kidnapping movie last night, which I should never watch. And I'm like, it's like, what is life, right? It's so fragile and it's so short. And if I knew that one of my kids was going to, I mean, heaven forbid, but let's just, I mean, I look at my psyche in doing this. If my psyche jumps ahead and goes, well, what if my child was kidnapped tomorrow? Or what if, because I'm trying to, you know, stretch myself in, you know, free range parenting styles instead of being the helicopter parent, what if that one time something happened?
Yeah.
What if on that ride to school that I'm oh so comfortable with, they disappeared?
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to rein all of those fears way back in. And part of me thinks what a absolutely dynamic part of my psyche is making me feel the loss so that I can feel the preciousness.
Yes.
Because we can get lost in how precious this gift is of parenthood. You know, the monotony and the nights and the tiredness and the lack of self, and you can get so bogged in that you forget the big picture. But here I am on my 4th child who's about to start solids and kids that are nearly teenagers, and I go, hang on, whoa, slow down, whoa, like, just pedal back, you know. And all of these things together in this last week have really made me sit with, if I was to lose a child next week, what would I want to spend my time doing? And I'd want to spend my time in my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes me want to hold them closer and love them longer. And so when I say I could lose myself in parenthood, I could just give over to that. You know, like just a wave, and to some extent be just content
and be fulfilled. And yes, I so hear that.
And then there's this other part of me that goes, what about me? You know, it's like me.
Yeah,
what about me? You know?
Yeah.
And what about this part of me? And what about this part of me? And what about the couple part of me? And the part of me that wants, you know, beautiful clothes and big holidays and a house renovation and to be expressed in the world and to be seen for being a woman, not a mother. And, you know, what about all of that part of me? What am I doing with that?
Gosh, I'm so mesmerised, because it's just so the journey of motherhood, isn't it? It's that push and that pull. It's like that tension, the paradox that just can have you motionless and in awe at the same time.
And that's exactly what it is. And so it's so funny we're doing this podcast because now it's all hitting me in the last week when I think about all of the thought processes that I've had in my head over the last week. It's this culmination of, which is the end of a year, right? This is a transition when we're kind of like smacked almost by that backlog whoosh of memories past. With the promise of what do we want to create for the future. This is the transition, right? No different to transition in labour. It's that part where it's all very intense and confusing and you're not sure sometimes whether you're coming or going, where you want to put all of that energy, what you want to birth and create on the other side of that
and you're
transition.
so close to it, but part of you just wants to run the fuck out of there.
Yeah, exactly. The overwhelm. The overwhelm of the immensities of the ways you think you don't measure up, or the goals that you haven't achieved, or the things you think will never happen for you. And not sure how you can be more when you feel like you are everything now. And I really, like, I just so get it. I get that complete mix that just washes together in this one pinnacle of transition, which happens to be around Christmas time when you're filled with family and you're filled with social media and you're filled with comparison and you're, you know, ready for the next beginning and you get to map out what that is. And it's fucking scary. So anyway, I think I've gone way off track from Mother of Four, but that's what I think about is I could totally give over to motherhood and do nothing but, and to some extent live a contented life. But I've also seen women who have given everything to their motherhood, and it's short. In the scheme of your life, it is short. By the time your children are 18, they've spent 80% of the time they will ever spend with you in a lifetime. By the time they're 18.
Wow.
I'm not so far from that. And it kind of makes me like go, fuck.
Yeah.
So it makes me put the value and the presence back into my motherhood, which of course serves my top value. So it's all such, you know, brilliance of my psyche.
Yeah.
But it also makes me hold dear the preciousness and the reason why, you know, maybe I'm not earning what I would like to be earning, but when we look at abundance being more than money, then my abundance is very richly funneled into an area of life that I feel like I would be lost without. So, you know, we say we lose ourselves in motherhood, but I think we really find ourselves.
I absolutely believe we find ourselves, and I think but sometimes it has to be a choice to find ourselves. You know, a choice to keep coming back to how is this everything that I need right now, and how is this helping me grow? How is this fulfilling me? Because we can get really stuck in the cultural messages around motherhood, which as we know, you know, our society and culture doesn't typically value the role of mothers. But we get to choose how we allow that to dictate our lives and how we choose to live our days. And I love the richness with which we're able to bring to our motherhood when we get super intentional about that, and we do value that preciousness.
That's exactly right. But you don't get the other stuff. You don't get the empowerment or the next step without the conscious creation of it. So this is why we're talking about this, right? It's new year, new transitions. We've just spoken about transition, and it's new ways of being. And it's simply to expand that out, because whatever you want to fit into your life, you can fit in. I absolutely believe that you can. But it seems impossible sometimes because you already feel so full. But that's just because the empowered areas of life that you currently run are filling that time. If you want to add in empowerment or a change in another area of life, you have to consciously carve it out until it becomes your new way of being. And this is like the evolution of self.
Until it becomes second nature, really. It's the forming of the habit.
It's the stacking, until it becomes a habit, exactly, until it becomes you. And then you add in the next thing, and then it becomes you, and then you add in the next thing. And so when you're consciously talking about carving out time, well, it's, you know, being really clear on new ways of being, new ways of empowering the things that you want to do and achieve. You can fit them in without needing to drop the ball on the other stuff. It just starts to look different. So, you know, I would say my fourth baby is my easiest baby. And not to say that a baby is easy, but easier because I've taken the pressure off myself needing to be everything And that's a really big difference for me, you know, and I can see just the magnificence in when we let our children be on their own. The way that they develop just honestly makes me nearly weep. Like I could sit there in conscious presence watching without needing to be, and I could nearly weep with gratitude for just, they come complete, and it just blows my freaking mind. How did I never see it before? You know?
I was reflecting on that even with my kids and how they relate to their grandparents and how much of my own stuff has in the past got in the way of really seeing the richness of that relationship, you know, and thinking that it needed to be anything other than how it is, and that I needed to somehow be doing more, but actually allowing them to blossom and build those relationships independent of me is such a gift, you know, to both myself and to them and to the grandparents. You know, I think sometimes, particularly if we've got such strong intentions around consciously parenting, we can start to really put that pressure on everybody else around us to really embody that too. But if we can take a step back and look at where is the connection, where is the love, where is the fulfillment, where is the richness, we see it. We're opening ourselves up to really being able to see for our children what's playing out for them in really beautiful ways.
All right, I just had to stop now. We're starting again because now I have a baby that I'm feeding. So if you hear funny noises in the background, it's Gwen. All right. Bridget.
And she's a guzzler.
She is. Back to new transitions, new ways of being.
Yeah, so part of really what inspired this whole concept of transitions in this booklet that we're going to be creating, which will be available on the website soon, is a transition that I'm finding myself facing with my son starting prep. And we're having lots of conversations around school and just reiterating that kinder's finished and what's school going to be like, and we're about to kind of do a little exercise book where we talk about, you know, the practical aspects of what school's going to be like and what his day is going to be like and who he's going to play with and teacher and all that kind of stuff.
Well, the reason you came up with that idea was because you're like, here's what I need. Surely there's other people that need it.
Yeah,
Jules, this is what we should do.
exactly.
I mean, that was pretty much the conversation you and I had.
Because I really realised that the transitions that our kids go through bring up big feelings for ourselves at the same age. And it's funny, like I had a conversation with my mum about when I started school, and my mum said, yeah, like, you know, you were crying because you didn't want me to walk you in. So I was really ready to have that sense of independence. However, I don't think she was. And so there's such a push-pull, such an incredible dynamic between us and our children around those processes of letting go. And in fact, that's what had come up in our conversation that you and I had at your place was, you know, I was facing this decision about whether we were going to do the school this year, and I broke down in tears saying, you know, I just don't think I'm ready to let him go. And that was
really big.
It's massive, but that was also the point.
That's a painful feeling too.
It's all, and you know, and I still find myself sinking back in. Hi, Gwen. I still find myself sinking back into that, but I also recognise that that's not a reason to hold him back. That's not a reason to not give him this next level of expansion, which he's seeking right now. Like, you know, he's showing me that that's what he wants to do, and so when we can start to have an inquiring mind around these transitions that we find ourselves in to figure out
which really
what's coming up for us.
I mean, do you think transitions really is just a word for some really big feelings?
Yeah.
Between one way of being to a new way of being.
Yeah, and holding on and letting go, which is essentially what parenting calls us to all of the time. You know, motherhood is that balance between holding on and letting go, and life is that balance. Gwen is doing the most cutest
Sorry. And now you're at that age where you pull up every time you hear a different voice. Yes.
So I think, you know, that was really personal story and perhaps on some level personal pain that's really pulled me into this space of really thinking, just like, you know, us creating this podcast, there must be other mothers who are at this crossroads, you know, who are really at this point of seeing, you know, perhaps the bigger picture that they're wanting to create, but the pain that's in between them and achieving that and fulfilling that.
Definitely.
because
And
so
creating
often,
really what we never had. Or you're saying, I want to create the thing that I need.
Yeah.
Because there'll be other mums that'll need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was funny when I put it out there to another group, they're like, yeah, and what about this transition and that transition? I'm like, yes, because there's so many of them that we go through with our children.
So many
and
transitions,
ourselves.
yeah. Which if you have one, you know, we're in the content creation of that for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So if you have a transition you'd love a toolkit on, then we would love you to contact us through Facebook or
Please
Instagram
do. Yeah.
or website, you know, drop us an email, because we definitely want to be able to put this together.
We want it to be super
everyone
relevant,
needs it.
and I think, you know,
And a quick reference guide for
Yeah.
how to handle transition for ourselves and how to handle transition for our children in a variety of different ways of being.
yeah,
Or settings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause there's so many. And in midst of all, you know, and this thing, we're going to be surrounded so soon with all the back to school stuff about things to buy and, you know, stuff to prepare physically. But what about the emotional and mental preparation, which can so often get left behind? And that's really what we're asking ourselves and you, our tribe, to step into if you're at this point of transition as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yes, if that's you, we'd love to hear from you and hear if there's something that kind of is speaking to you around the transitions that you're finding yourself into as you go into a new year. And I do remind you again to go back to the podcast this time last year, which was New Year, New You, because
Which was 79.
79, yes. And it's a great podcast just to kind of look at the way we can reframe our year that's gone and what we want to take into the year ahead. And really get clear on that gratitude and appreciation piece, which is what helps us create from a place of fulfillment as opposed to feeling like we're lacking in something. And so we'd remind you too that we'd love you to hop on iTunes and give us a rating if you can, if you're enjoying the podcast, or
Stitcher.
Facebook, or Stitcher.
Which we only recently discovered we were on.
Yeah. So there you go, we're everywhere. And please do get in touch and hop on Facebook, Nourishing Your Mother, and Instagram, we're Nourishing Your Mother as well. And to connect with you, Jules.
Here's thepleasurenutritionist.com and
And
Newbridge.
it's suburbansandcastles.com.
And your movie?
We are screening Rise, which is
in February,
yeah,
isn't
in
it?
February,
Yeah.
yes. So that's happening in Melbourne, and it will be in Geelong later in the year, and perhaps in some other locations in Australia too later in the year, which will be great to bring that road trip film, which is the film that I made with a friend when our babies were babies, not toddlers, and all about women doing amazing stuff in the world, and really the motherhood and the story of womanhood, like what it's like to be a modern woman and have, you know, the values and beliefs that we have and the ways and the lives that we want to lead. So yeah,
Do that.
so to nourish.
Which way are you going with it, Bridget?
Remember to
You've got to
nourish the woman
to rock the family. Well, we kind of got there. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.